terms of a quick overview of the Club Resilience Fund, which I think is important just to kind of set the scene and get you started. The fund is targeted at clubs who are experiencing immediate financial hardship and are facing threat of closure due to financial pressure. So that is one of the first considerations you have as a club before completing your application. Your club committee will need to discuss and agree if you wish to complete the application process. The funding amount announced by Sport Ireland is €15 million. It is open to all sports clubs affiliated to national governing bodies. So I am going to take this opportunity now to say we don't know how many clubs will apply, what amounts clubs will apply for, or how much each club or NGB is likely to get at this stage. As Vincent will mention further on, you will need to work out accurately how much you need as a club and apply for that amount. It is not a guarantee of funding, and I do expect demand to far exceed supply, but it is important that Swim Ireland, Sport Ireland, and by extension the government know how much funding our clubs and sport in general needs to be sustainable in the current climate. The application questions have been set by Sport Ireland in line with the information they have requested from the national governing bodies. As you might imagine, and for those of you that have read the application already, the criteria is strict. We need real transparency and openness around what you as a club are facing, and we will be doing our absolute best to support you through this. The deadline is 5 p.m. on the 31st of August, and you're going to be sick of hearing me say this by the end of the presentation. You'll be dreaming about it tonight. The link will not be available after that time. Absolutely no late or incomplete applications will be accepted. Once closed, we will then apply to Sport Ireland based on the applications received. And finally, on this slide, and just to be very, very clear, no canvassing is permitted. The club support officers, Sarah Kelly and I, are here to answer any queries you may have, but please do not ask us to promote your club above others. There should be no contact with Swim Ireland board members or senior management team members to seek support for your application. Now, I say all of this knowing that none of our volunteers would intentionally set out to canvass and risk their club being excluded from funding. So I'm trying to get that out of the way quickly so we can move on to the important part of the evening. So in terms of the application process, some of what I'm going to show you now is going to seem basic, but I would encourage you to follow these steps. This is a committee effort, it's not a solo run, but I would suggest that you appoint one person to take the lead on completing and submitting the application form. Do not be afraid to delegate, but if you do, remember to follow up and have mini deadlines so that you can stay on track for the 31st of August. I would suggest that you set up a shared folder on Google Drive or Microsoft or something similar where you as a committee can compile the documents and evidence that you need over the next couple of weeks. So here are my guides in terms of preparing your application process. Print the application questions. If you do have access to a printer, I always find it useful to print out documents like this so that you can make handwritten notes initially. So, I mean, scrolling on the side, I always do it and I find it helpful. The next thing is read the application form carefully. And if you have a highlighter, and again, I know some of these are going to seem so simple, like you're doing at competitions and galas, it's useful to highlight keywords. So to pick out what it is that we're looking for. And again, Vincent will pick up on some of that this evening. If there is a question that you don't understand, drop your club support officer an email or give us a call. We are here to help you, and what we have put together in terms of the application guide is trying to further clarify those questions. So we would welcome your feedback on that. Is that helpful to you? Then the next thing that I would encourage clubs to do is type up your responses in a Word document. So the guidance document that's attached and I sent out earlier is in Word. So I would suggest you use this to type up your answers. So either add a column to the sections that are there, or delete the guidance that's in there as you're completing it, so that you're able to copy and paste that into the online survey. So please do take my advice on that. It also helps with spelling and grammar checking, so don't forget to use that. And you might kind of think, well, it's not a spelling test, but I will say to you that if we can't read or understand, so particularly around grammar, it's really important that we're able to easily understand the message that you're trying to get across. So do get your spelling and your grammar checked. And then I suppose adding into that, circulate the document once it's typed up within your committee and be open to feedback and suggestions. And this is where it's really helpful as well, having it on a shared drive so several people can input into it at once. Be open to feedback and suggestions. So it's not one person's document, this is for your club. So make sure that you are seeking input in that. And make sure you give a deadline for responses. So any of us that are seeking feedback on stuff know how irritating it is when you're waiting until the 11th hour for people to get back to you. And then I think what's really important as well, and I'm going to say it again, make sure you have somebody with a critical eye just to check for understanding, spelling and grammar. And that's really, really helpful. Then Vincent again is going to talk a little bit more on this. Gather your supporting evidence. Do this early, and where possible, delegate this now. So if you're taking responsibility for filling in the application form, who can you delegate the evidence gathering to? So it might be several people. And if you need to request bank statements, do that this week. Get it done, get it requested, so that if you have a bit of a lag on getting those posted out to you or emailed, whatever that might be, that you have enough time to do that. And it's not a prose that you're writing. It's not a thesis that you have to put together. Answer the question that you're asked. Don't ramble. Stick to the point and make the most of the application. Bullet point where possible. And when the application's closed, just to let you know, we will export and view these in an Excel document, and it's across about 30 columns. And if we have 100 clubs applying, so it needs to be easy for us to be able to filter and read. So just to bear that in mind as you're putting it together, okay? So don't forget your full stop so that we're able to read and follow what you're putting in there. And then you're going to hear this again. Apply early. Deadline is at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 31st of August. No excuses will be accepted. Do not wait until 4:55 p.m. to start to complete your application form. Get your application in as soon as you have it ready. If you're ready to apply next week, do it next week. But definitely trying to get your application finished and sent in the day before. If you have any issues with submitting, you need to contact us by Friday the 28th because it is a weekend. I'm just going to flag it with you now, and especially for the Leinster clubs, I'm going to be off on Monday the 31st of August. So you need to really be thinking about working towards the Friday the 28th of August will be my recommendation. It also means that you're not stressing about it over the weekend, especially those of you that have kids going back to school. You have enough to be getting on with. So they're kind of my parts so far. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Vincent. I'm just going to move on to the next screen for you there, Vincent. If you want to, you can shout at me and tell me when to move on.
Yeah, no problem, Aisling. So just, I suppose, the biggest thing here is that all the information that you're going to require is in your accounts, is in your budgets, is in your cash flows. It's the most important person from your club point of view in putting the information, the backup information together for this is your treasurer. So you're going to be working very closely with your treasurer. Now, if your treasurer has stepped down this year and a new treasurer is in, I would suggest that you bring back the treasurer to work with you on this from the previous year or two to go through your accounts and pull the information out that you require, which I will discuss with you now as we go on. But you can move on to the next one, Aisling, if you don't mind. Just next one, please. Okay, so the amount you're applying for is basically the effect of COVID on the club. It's the effect of COVID on the club from March to June and from June to December. I think those are the periods that they're really looking for. And it's the amount that's going to be required to keep the club afloat. As Aisling has said earlier on about being realistic about the amount you're applying for, you also want to be comprehensive. And you know, when you put in your application, you don't want to turn around a week later and go, oh my God, I never put in X or I never put in Y. So now is the time to sit down with your committee and with your treasurer and with your previous treasurer and say, right, look, this is what we're applying for, the losses, the loss of income, and the increased costs. So that's really what it is. So you're looking at income and costs and the differential there of what the shortfall is to keep the club afloat. And even if your losses and your costs are more, that may not be the amount of money that realistically you need to keep the club going, because remember, the more you apply for, the less other clubs may get. So be fair at the same time. We'll move on to the next one, actually. Okay, most of this information will be available from your budget, and the amount you're applying for, as I say again, is from your losses and your increase in costs. So, for example, based on last year and the year before, from March to June, what was the amount of money that you took in on fees, on fundraising? And fundraising is very broad now. This could be galas, it could be events such as bagpacking, it could be a whatever type of event you can think of. That is the type of stuff you're talking about. And again, the same going on from July to December, is again, you're looking at the amount of money that the reduction in income and the increase in costs. A typical one would be, for example, if some clubs would have a 3-term fee and they would break it equally into 3 terms. Obviously, the first term from September to December would be a tough one because it's so long, but you'd then have Easter to June, July would be the short one, and you would make up the shortfall from September. But because that disappeared, some clubs would suffer because of that. So you need to budget that into your losses. Other losses, particularly from the likes of March to June, July, would have been primarily around loss of income from fundraising and galas. You shouldn't have had costs for coaching, and you shouldn't have had obviously income from fees from swimmers. So that's really the losses there. And in the evidence side of things, then basically what you'll be showing over the past number of years is specific details on money that you would have raised in your club gala, fees that you would, or income that you would have raised from fundraising, be it whatever type of fundraising you would have done. Could even be a social event or whatever that you do in your club, but you weren't able to do it. There's one of the clubs in Connacht that do the golden ticket. I mean, it was up on 15,000. The loss of that to them is huge. So that needs to go in there, because that is a loss of income. And then on the other side, from July straight to Christmas, that you have extra costs because of less numbers in the lane. You have maybe increased pool hire costs there because you need extra lanes. And you also have the situation where you may have swimmers only doing half the hours they would have done in the previous years. So therefore, you have to be realistic as about what you're going to charge them as a fee. So when all of this comes together, you will be now doing a new budget, and your new budget will show your increase in costs, your loss of income, and then your shortfall on a cash flow basis to keep the club afloat up until December. And that's really, really, really important, that your club has these tools available to it, and that your treasurer is able to manipulate the budget in order to show this ongoing. We have templates that we'll give you if you don't have them, and we will certainly work with you as much as we can to help you, produce the evidence based on actual figures that your club has achieved. But whatever information you have which backs up these figures is very, very important. Like, for example, if you have a report from your AGM which specifically talks about the money raised at your fundraising, where you have thank you letters going out, anything that you have that backs up the information, please supply that. With regard to your reserves, again, just because you have reserves doesn't necessarily stop you from applying for, or rules you out from applying for the resilience fund, because you may use your reserves very, very quickly. If your costs are increased substantially, if those reserves are ring fenced for refunds on fees or whatever they're there for, depending on the level. Obviously, if you're a club that has large reserves, well, then you won't be qualifying for this. But if you have realistic reserves and you do actually have large increase in costs, and you can show that the club needs funding to stay afloat up until December, then you do qualify for the resilience fund. Any other source of income? Now, one of these could possibly be the any grants that you would be getting from local authorities. I know that there's a small grant available of 1,500 from most sports partnerships at the moment. And again, if there's any other grants that you would receive and have received previously, and if there's any grants that you received previously that you can't receive now, well, again, they would go into your loss of income. But obviously, if there's any other income increase in membership or whatever it might be realistic with this, because it's, you know, in order to give a proper picture of where you are as a club. And this is something that you should be doing irrespective of the resilience fund, to know exactly what it costs to run the club for the year. You should know what it costs in 2018, what it cost in 2019, and what it's actually going to cost for 2020. And then, as I said before, that will actually highlight to you the actual shortfall and the amount needed to survive. So that will be the figure that will go in on top. So all of these strands will be leading straight into the amount you're applying for. And all of those will be giving the reasons that you're applying for this in order for the club to survive. And basically that's what it is. It is what it says in the tin. It's the Club Resilience Fund. So therefore, it's how much money the club needs to survive until December. Okay, the evidence required, again, I've touched on some of those as we went on, and I would go back to 3 years. If you want to go back 4 years, go back and do it if they're there, but 3 years would be sufficient. Basically, as I said before, your reports from your AGM, financial statements of accounts for the past 2 seasons. So your profit and loss in your balance sheet, you should be able to produce those. And again, as I say, this is, you know, confidential information. We will treat it as such, and we will help you to work through this. You should have no reason not to show this, because by showing this, it shows what position your club is in. If it's a thing that you're not showing it because there's too much money there, well, then you shouldn't be applying for this. So it's very, very important that these financial statements of accounts for the past 2 seasons. And again, if there's a report by your treasurer, even highlighting last year that, you know, you're very tight. As I said earlier on, normally your club should be running your fixed cost based on fees. Some clubs are very, very tight on that, and they do a certain amount of fundraising to help keep the fees down. They would be in very difficult situations now. So, you know, you probably would have financial statements by your treasurers in your at your AGMs, which would have said, look, we're very tight on finances, we need to do extra fundraising, we need to do whatever. Those type of documents are very important. Copies of bank statements for the past 12 months detailing the club's position as at the 1st of August 2020. So basically what that would do, it would show us where you've been financially for the last 12 months and how COVID is affecting you and how it's likely to affect you based on the information that you've supplied us, which is your increase in costs, your drop in income due to, as I said, pool hire costs, loss of fees, whatever. So we can very, very quickly see, and you as a club can see, and your treasurer will be able to pinpoint the effects and highlight that in words. So that's the sort of stuff that you'll be going through in words, that because you've been on a tight position financially for the last 12 months, and now that you've got a loss of X, Y, and Z, your club is in shortfall of Y by the end of the year. And as I said, you're also working on the proposed budget for the next 12 months. That budget there is what it's going to cost to run the club for the next 12 months. And you're going to show it with the grant, and you're going to show it without the grant. And that is what's really, really important, because that will it'll be backed up by all the information that you've supplied initially, and it'll back up the statements that you're making in your seeking of the grant. And as I said before, the other supporting documents, such as annual reports, anything you can give us, and nothing, I wouldn't throw anything away, just bring everything that you have to the table. And I mean, we as support officers will sit down with you and work through this with you as much as we can. Aisling, have you any other comments to make on any of that?
No, just actually one thing, Vincent, that you mentioned there in terms of other funding. So for those of you that don't know, most of the local sports partnership, and it's through the same big announcements that Sport Ireland had for funding, the 70 or so million that funding was given to the local sports partnership. So how they're rolling that out is a flat rate grant of €1,500 for clubs. So I would encourage clubs to apply for it. And I know Sport NI had a similar grant scheme running. So, I mean, we would always encourage clubs to apply for all grants. It doesn't exclude you from this grant. You just need to declare it. And I mean, we'll be working through the application process with Sport Ireland at the same time. So, I mean, if it comes to the point where the grants are being paid out, it's at that point that you'll declare that, you know, if you've received a grant from another body. So, because we will be able to see that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you've applied for 10,000 and you've gotten 1,500 from the local sports partnership or Sport NI, that you won't receive anything. So just, you know, don't be afraid to apply for multiple grants. Just to be honest and declare them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you there, Aisling. And the other thing is that no two clubs are going to be the same. I mean, you're going to have clubs coming in for very large amounts of money here. Whether they get that or whether they don't get that, we don't know, because obviously there's a pot of 15 million, but that's divided amongst all clubs, all sports. So, you know, we're not going to get huge amounts of money, but every club is going to be different. And the biggest thing here is to don't forget about what the club down the road is going to get or not going to get. Stick to what you require to get your club across the line, and you know, basically it's the monetary effect on COVID and the financial stability of your club. So it's really what it's going to cost you to survive, and that's really what this is about. And we will work with you as much as we can.
Thanks, Vincent. Okay, so look, we're nearly at the end of the presentation, and I suppose I just want to wrap up with 5 top tips. And again, I know I'm probably going to sound like a broken record now. I can't stress enough that you read, take your time, and make sure that you understand the questions. So read them thoroughly. Put in a quality application, so quality over quantity. If you can use 100 words instead of 250 to deliver your message, then do so. There's no need to just, you know, waffle and ramble on. Please do seek support if you need it. Ask for help from your committee and from your club support officers. We are here to help, and we do want our clubs to be successful. So, you know, I mean, the strength of the application from the whole organisation going into Sport Ireland is important. And then evidence. I mean, I don't think we've under-stressed how important the evidence is. It's required, so don't delay. Just gather it today. So start working on that. Sorry, let me go back. And then this is the last time I'm going to say this evening. Apply early. There's no excuses, no late applications. So please, please, please remember the deadline is 5 p.m. on Monday, the 31st of August. There's no reason to wait until 4:55 p.m. Get your application in as early as possible.